Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 135, which is called The Last Battle Urashiki. And this was an interesting episode because obviously it was our big, really well animated action scene of this arc. We've kind of been building up to it for a while. The final confrontation with Urashiki, we'll finally get to find out his fate. They gave it the big animation budget. But I think it's somewhat fair to say that it wasn't really that amazing of an episode. I don't think it was bad, but I just don't think it lived up to the hype and the amount of setup that we actually had. Because the ultimate takeaway that I have from this is that they really didn't know exactly what they wanted to do with Urashiki. That's what I take away from this more than anything. That they had this big villain, and Otsutsuki out here, he's not the most important Otsutsuki, but he is still one of them, so he's always going to be a threat, and they've had him recurring every so often, and now they finally commit to doing the big arc to resolve him. And they just, I think in the end, didn't have really that much of an idea about, how important they wanted to make his defeat. Because by the end of this, it doesn't feel that important. That okay, the timeline was at stake, kind of. But they didn't do enough to really get across that, here is, what Urashiki is really about. Here's his place in the clan and why he is different or the same compared to other Otsutsuki. And I think a lot of it is just kind of exemplified by the fact that, what's the whole karma mark situation? The fact that he seemed to just be killed by this mega Rasengan that Naruto and Boruto do. And there's no hint whatsoever that his spirit has lingered on and he has a karma mark to give out or anything like that. Now, there's still an episode left in the arc. I assume it is just one episode. The next one is going to resolve this arc. There's still an opportunity to do something with that, but here in the action, when they defeated him, they didn't do anything like that. They didn't really tease a karma mark. Even within the episode, I think the only mention of karma mark stuff was that Urashiki was he gets so angry that he's I don't care that you are the vessel, I'm still going to kill you. The only one I'm going to spare is Naruto because I want this chakra. So clearly he had decided at a certain point that he wasn't really going to kill Boruto because he is a vessel for Momoshiki, which suggests some level of, him caring about the sort of structure of the Otsutsuki family that, in the end, the partnership that we know about from the manga that they're usually sent here in groups of two was Momoshiki and Kinshiki. They were the duo there. And Urashiki just sort of had come along with them, presenting the idea that he is meant to be viewed as not being as perhaps high up in the Otsutsuki clan as the other two. The fact that he was just a third sort of add-on, and he wasn't sent out as a partnership of his own. Because obviously what the manga has revealed to us now is that Momoshiki and Kinshiki was one duo. Kaguya's duo partner was Ishiki, of course, Jigen, and that works. It presents the idea that those four were important. Obviously Kinshiki is not that important, but Momoshiki ended up being very important as a sort of leader of those two. Now they present the idea that Ishiki is important because he left a karma mark behind. So we have two examples in Naruto of a Otsutsuki having died or whatever at some point and leaving their spirit behind in the form of the karma mark. Now, of course, we don't have the backstory on how exactly that happened with Ishiki. We know exactly how it happened with Boruto and Momoshiki because of the movie, of course. So that's sort of two examples out of basically all the Otsutsuki we've dealt with of a karma mark being left behind, of course, because Kinshiki you can explain away that he basically gave his essence to Momoshiki, so he's sort of out of the picture at that point. Kaguya wasn't killed, she was just sealed away again. So there was no karma mark stuff to be dealt with there. Leaving this as the main example of the sort of confusing aspect of, like, he was killed, so did he just not have time to do whatever karma mark technique to, like, leave his spirit behind, or could he not do it because he's not that high up in the clan as some of the others? That's where, like, I was hoping that this arc would explore some of that stuff, and that Otsutsuki world building, I think, is ultimately what the main goal of Boruto as a series is sort of trying to accomplish. In terms of the big stuff that we're dealing with right now in the manga, it is ultimately Otsutsuki focused, and we want to learn as much as we can about them because Boruto's power heavily relates to it. And I think there's also some frustration there with just the idea of, like, yeah, like, no mention of the Jogan power that Boruto has. Like, he wasn't using the karma mark here, like, at all. That wasn't even brought in any way into effect here. And yeah, outside of that one mention from Urashiki, it just felt like they were just treating Urashiki like a very powerful villain, and not necessarily as, like, the plot stuff that is there because he's an Otsutsuki. And that's where I think the frustration was, that they did a lot of the sort of transformation stuff in the same way that we saw Momoshiki, of, like, his final big power-up of, like, consuming more chakra is, like, his eye, he opens up a new eye, it's all gold, he's at his max form, he has the sort of the black markings all over his body, and he sort of gets a new form. Here he gets a sort of bird-like form, which was quite interesting, and he starts using a bunch of different types of jutsu that seem to just allow him to dominate here. But beyond that, beyond just the power-up, I felt like they just sort of left the plot, like, importance of Urashiki to the wayside. That this is an arc that's about just a powerful villain and time travel, and we're not quite at the plot point yet where we can properly explain Otsutsuki stuff. And this is where we get into the confusion about, like, what way are we, with Boruto just in general, meant to view the different mediums that the story's being told in that, like, the manga has always been the main canon. That's where right now we are actually exploring some very important content. But it also seems like the manga is aware of the fact that it's not doing everything, and that they're purposefully using the anime to extend everything out, suggesting to us, of course, that the anime is meant to be viewed as being canon in terms of, like, extended canon, giving us more information, because obviously the manga has actually skipped over a good amount of information, in that Urashiki's not mentioned in the manga, like, at all. I don't really believe the Jogan has been mentioned in the manga either, outside of the fact that, of course, the opening chapter where we get to see Boruto, like, in the future, shows him with the eye power, but, like, it's never been explained in the same way as the few episodes with, like, Tonieri in the anime have, like, explained it, the whole Star of Hope thing, and getting to actually see him use it. So they have a lot of stuff to eventually get to, and I'm not quite sure why they're, like, overly holding back on it, in that I think a lot of fans would be much happier with this episode if they had explored some of that stuff, and that instead you have this situation where, like, really, like, Naruto did, like, one of the more earlier stages of, like, tail beast transformation, and combined with Boruto, their Rasengan was enough to defeat an Otsutsuki, when before what we needed was basically, like, Naruto basically giving, like, all of his chakra into a Rasengan for Boruto to hit Momoshiki with, which made more sense because, like, 7th Hokage Naruto in Boruto is, like, so powerful. It makes sense that, you know, something like that would, you know, win the day. But here it didn't make as much sense, and it just felt like, okay, I get you're doing this sort of time travel arc, and you needed to have young Boruto and young Naruto together, their powers be the ones to win it, but they could have done something a little bit more, and that's probably where you needed to have, like, Sasuke power up their attack, maybe Sasuke and Jiraiya both power up the attack. Instead, what they did was they kind of just got across the idea that their Rasengan got the advantage because like Jiraiya and Sasuke's attacks sort of they influence, Urashiki's ability to fight back, and that's how they burst through. So, it was cool to see, Jiraiya use the Rasengan, and especially Sasuke to use Kirin. Is always a great jutsu when we see that one. And, it made sense. Like, it was a huge Rasengan again. It just was like, did it really make as much sense compared to, like, the previous sort of finishing move against an Otsutsuki? But in general, like as I said, it was fine. Like we did get to see Jiraiya use a bunch of different jutsu. When Sasuke came back, he at least did some of the jutsu stuff. He was using Amaterasu and so on. It at least made the fight interesting. They weren't just holding back like in the other episodes where you're just asking the question of like, why aren't the characters using their jutsu? Like, they're just sort of standing there, punch, kick, kunai, the really standard stuff, even though, like, we're way past that at this point. Why is no one using jutsu? The manga at times can be very guilty of that, of always starting fights off with just going really light, even though we should be already onto step, like, 5 of the fight. Beyond that, I do unfortunately think that there is more sort of negatives in that, again, this episode was just more kind of setup, tease with Sakura and Sasuke of like, okay, he wakes up again, he says her name, and it seems to just kind of jog in her head that like, oh, like he really seems to know me, and my suspicions are that it's him. But before she can ask the question, she of course collapses from exhaustion, having healed him so much. And it's just like, look, I get what you're doing, you're building up to the final episode, but like, why are you spending so much time in this episode just to have scenes that really only exist to just tease, set up, when we already had it in the previous episode, and you had the same criticisms of just like, it's not good enough to just cut back to a scene and not do anything in that scene. So I hope in the final episode that Sakura Sasuke scene is well done, because I assume, like, especially because with this episode Boruto is directly called Naruto Dad a couple of times, there will be some explanation, some memory erasing to be done here before we do the time transfer back. So I assume they will have to just have like a big reveal of just like everyone is aware of who they are, and we get those big kind of moments that we've been waiting for. Then we erase everyone's memory and go back. That kind of has to be the way this goes down, because you want to get that kind of emotional moment between a younger Sakura and Sasuke, with just the hope for the future, basically, of them knowing that Sasuke eventually comes back. That even though their memories will be erased, they'll know that their desire to get him back, there's meaning behind it. So that you want to see that. Again, I think stuff like, what's Naruto's reaction going to be to like, what you called me dad? What? How does this happen? And especially like if he reveals like in front of everyone that like Hinata's my mom, and like she just like collapses because she's so happy that like she and Naruto get together. Those are the sort of moments that like they need to do in the next episode. They just need to go all out with the references. I don't really care, like, be super fan servicey with it. Just have like all of these kind of fun dynamics with the time traveling, knowing you're probably going to erase basically everything that's happened here. So that's definitely what I want to see happen next. But yeah, it's a tough one, because I don't think the episode was terrible or anything like that. I don't even think it was bad. It was just not what it should have been. Like the animation was there. I just don't feel the writing was there. And I wonder if to some degree it is just that they didn't know what they could or could not do with Urashiki. That they were unsure if they were meant to mention a lot of Karma Mark stuff with him or not, so they just said, oh, he's just another powerful villain. When arguably he should have been used to further our understanding of the Ototsukis. But you know, it is what it is. You know, this is ultimately not the most important arc. It's a very fun arc because of the time travel stuff, and Boruto getting to see young Naruto. But definitely more could have been done here, I think is probably the best way to say it. So that's where I'm going to wrap up the video. Again, I'm excited to see next week, because I think next week should be better, because it will be more character driven rather than being fight driven and it not quite having the impact. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. I really want to know how everyone kind of viewed this episode specifically, because I think it did have the potential to be really big, but I don't think turned out quite the way I wanted it to. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.